Good morning, dear listeners. My name is Margaret Whitfield, and I am 74 years old. If you've chosen to sit with me today, perhaps with a warm cup of coffee in your hand, know that I am grateful. My story is not an easy one to tell, nor an easy one to hear, but it is a story that may help someone find courage inside themselves. For most of my life, I believed my marriage was built on trust. My husband, Lawrence, everyone called him Larry, was a bus driver, steady and reliable. Every month from the earliest days of our marriage, he sent envelopes of money to his sister, Nora, who he claimed had lifelong health troubles. It became as regular as the ticking of a clock. Even when rent pressed hard, even when our 3 children needed shoes or medicine, still those envelopes with Nora's name appeared. And I, being a trusting wife, swallowed every question that rose in my throat. I met Larry in the late 1960s, when summers smelled of rain on hot sidewalks and jukebox songs floated out of diners on every corner. I was 19 then, the oldest daughter of a waterman turned warehouse worker. My family lived modestly, my father coming home every evening with tired hands and a bent back. Larry was a bus driver, his navy jacket crisp, his clipboard pressed under his arm like a badge of responsibility. We met by chance, a torn grocery bag, apples rolling across the concrete, laughter spilling like sunlight between strangers. From that fleeting accident bloomed a love I thought would last a lifetime. We married quickly, as so many did then. A small church with wood-paneled walls, a borrowed dress that rubbed blisters into my shoulders, shoes that pinched. Our lives began in a tiny apartment above a locksmith shop. The air was filled with the metallic scent of oil and iron, the radiator ticking like a heartbeat through every night. Money was scarce, but love seemed abundant. Larry worked long hours. I stayed home, hemming clothes, patching worn trousers, telling bedtime stories to the 3 little ones who came to us in quick succession: Paul, clever and serious, clever; Ruth, curious and bright; and Daniel, my sweet youngest, with a laugh soft enough to heal wounds I didn't even know I carried. Larry always told me he worked for the family, and I believed him. How could I not? He returned from long drives with weary smiles, the smell of diesel in his clothes. When he placed envelopes for Nora on our mantel, I accepted them without protest. A good wife trusted her husband, and I wanted to be a good wife. But trust, I would learn, can be a fog. It can soften the edges of reality until you no longer see clearly at all. For 12 years, I carried those unasked questions quietly. By then, the envelopes blended into the wallpaper of our lives. But around the 12th year of marriage, shadows began to creep where sunlight had once lived. Larry's work schedule grew erratic. His runs shifted inexplicably. He left for New York, but returned without Diesel's clinging scent, without the scuffed soles of a man who spent 12 hours pacing bus depots. Once, when folding laundry, I slipped a hand into his pocket and pulled out not loose change, but a folded birthday card made of cheap colored paper, its lettering careful, deliberate. Happy birthday, our love. May God give you many more years as the father and husband you are. With love, Nora and Rebecca. My hands trembled. Husband and father. Rebecca. I already had 3 children who called him father. Who was Rebecca? I should have confronted him, but fear pinned me still. Then came another blow. The phone rang one winter afternoon, a manager from Harbor Transit. They wanted to assign Larry an emergency run to New York, but according to their records, he hadn't worked that route that week at all. My blood ran cold. Where was he going, if not New York? Who was he seeing? The suspicion that had whispered for years now screamed. Rummaging through his drawer one morning, I found an envelope with Nora's name, but this time it was stamped with an address in Annapolis. My heart pounded as though I'd touched a live wire. I copied the address onto a slip of paper, hiding it behind the frame of our wedding photo. A cruel irony, proof of betrayal tucked behind the day he had sworn himself to me before God. I lasted 2 weeks before I could no longer endure the weight of doubt. When he announced another run to Philadelphia, I kissed his cheek as though nothing were wrong. And the moment the door shut behind him, I packed a small bag and caught a Greyhound bus to Annapolis. 2 hours later, I stood trembling before a neat yellow house with a sign reading, Nora's Atelier, custom clothing. Inside, the air smelled of lavender and starch, the walls draped with rolls of beautiful fabric brighter than I had ever dared afford. A bell chimed above my head. Out from the back came a girl, 14 perhaps, with long brown hair and hazel-flecked gray eyes, the exact eyes my son Paul wore in his face. My stomach lurched. "My dad is home," she chirped. Footsteps followed, and then he appeared, my Larry, standing in the doorway in his shirt sleeves. His face went white as chalk. Behind him entered Nora, elegant and composed, until she saw me, and her smile collapsed all at once. And so the entire deception unraveled in seconds. Larry had not been sending money to a sick sister. He had been building a second life, with Nora, who believed herself a wife, with Rebecca, who believed herself his only daughter. The confrontation was thunderous. Rebecca sobbed. "Do I have brothers and a sister?" I nodded bitterly. 3 of them: Paul, Ruth, and Daniel. And soon another. I am carrying one now. Nora's face hardened to fury. She turned on him. "You told me you were widowed. You told me you lived only on a pension." My voice rose too. 13 years, Larry. 13 years of scraps for our children while you built her a shop. 2 women, 2 families, 1 man's lies. After that day, I never saw him in our home again. He abandoned Nora and Rebecca just as surely as he abandoned me. Worse, he left behind debts, loans in my name, loan sharks on my porch demanding payment. I had nothing left but my children and my mother's old Singer sewing machine, and so I sewed. Piece by piece I stitched our survival. Neighbors whispered that my husband had vanished, that another baby swelled beneath my heart, that surely we'd collapse. But for every whisper I pressed another seam. For every cruel glance at the market, another garment. Each finished hem was proof. I would not crumble. Then came Nora's call. Her voice cracked with the same despair I knew too well. Larry had left her and Rebecca too. "The shop is failing," she whispered. "I don't know what to do." I should have spat back rage. Instead, I said, "Come to Baltimore." 2 weeks later, she arrived on my doorstep with her daughter in tow. At first, the air between us was barbed and bitter. Rebecca carried shame in her eyes. Ruth muttered jealous words. Paul avoided looking at the half-sister whose eyes mirrored his. But grief binds people. And betrayal, endured together, forges bonds stronger than iron. Soon Paul and Rebecca shared books. Ruth let Rebecca braid her hair. Daniel, sweet Daniel, called her Becky, as though she had always been there. And Nora and I, once enemies, began sewing side by side, turning misfortune into progress, scraps into beginnings. Together we opened Harbor Grace Clothing. In the cramped living room, with thread tangling around textbooks, we stitched a legacy. Eventually, bulk orders came. Uniforms for a cannery, aprons for a shipyard. Our children grew alongside the shop, each finding a role. Paul became an architect, Ruth a designer, Daniel a salesman, Rebecca an accountant and philanthropist. Years later, word arrived that Larry had died in a car accident in North Carolina, alone. No inheritance to claim, no funeral to attend. He was gone as abruptly as he had lived between lives. That night, Nora and I lit a candle not for him, but for ourselves, for the freedom his absence finally gave us. Decades passed. Harbor Grace grew from scraps to a sunlit storefront, and so did we. Nora, my unlikely sister, passed away years later with my hand in hers. The children prospered. Grandchildren filled our homes with joy, and the business endured not as a monument to profit, but to resilience. Now, at 74, I sit on my porch, crickets humming in the summer night. I glance at walls covered in photographs of children and grandchildren, each of them proof that out of betrayal can grow strength, and out of ruin can rise hope. I never remarried. My story was not about finding another husband. My story was about finding myself. And this, dear listener, is what I learned. Family is not only blood. It is those who stand beside you in the storm. Betrayal is not always the end. Sometimes it is the beginning. A crack is not only a wound. It is where the light comes through. So if you carry your own shadows, remember me. Not as the wife who was betrayed, but as the woman who sowed survival until it became legacy. Do not measure your worth by who abandoned you. Measure it by how you rise. And rise, my friends, you must, trembling perhaps, broken perhaps, but unbroken in spirit, because that is where freedom begins. There's the full, expanded rewrite, long, layered, poetic, ready for a voiceover video or book-style narration. Do you also want me to structure this as chapters, sections, almost like an audiobook script, so it flows across multiple episodes or videos, instead of one continuous monologue? That would make it easier to split into multiple long-form uploads or storytelling parts.